The cafeteria was packed, heat rising off bodies, metal trays scraping against concrete tables. In the corner, alone, silent, sat the new black inmate. No threats, no attitude, just a quiet stillness that made him almost invisible. And invisible men are the ones bullies love the most. A bald man covered in tattoos walked over, his crew close behind, blocking the light around the new guy. His name was Bob Morgan, and for 6 years he'd ruled this prison like his personal kingdom. He leaned forward, let saliva gather on his tongue, and spit straight into the man's food. The tray shook, mashed potatoes splashed, laughter exploded across the room. "Eat it," Bob sneered. "Come on, you're used to swallowing worse." Another inmate knocked the spoon away. A third shoved the man's shoulder, trying to get a reaction, anything, but the man didn't blink, didn't breathe differently, didn't even rise from his seat. He wiped the spit from his tray with a napkin, slow, calm, almost respectful. And that terrified the few inmates watching from afar, because only two kinds of people stay calm like that in prison: men who are broken, or men who have killed enough people to know they don't need to prove anything. Bob slammed his hands on the table. "You deaf or something?" I said. He never finished because the inmate finally looked up. One glance, cold, measured, a predator reading his prey. And in that instant, Bob and his crew realized something was wrong. Very wrong. Those weren't the eyes of an ordinary inmate. Those were the eyes of a man trained to eliminate threats in silence. A man whose past was drenched in missions no one talked about. A man the military once called the Ghost. But Bob didn't know that yet. He was about to find out. Stay with me until the end, because what this ex-Navy SEAL did next, inside that prison yard, left every bully, every inmate, and every guard speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. His name was Jack Morrison, 38 years old, serving 8 years for manslaughter. But that's where the official records ended. What they didn't tell you was that Jack had spent 15 years in the most classified operations the Navy ever conducted, missions that didn't exist on paper, targets that disappeared without explanation, and a kill count that would make seasoned soldiers question their own courage. Bob Morgan and his crew had no idea they were messing with a man who once infiltrated terrorist compounds alone, a man who could kill 7 different ways using nothing but a plastic fork. A man whose silence wasn't weakness. It was the calm before annihilation. 3 months earlier, downtown parking garage, 11:47 p.m., Jack Morrison was walking to his car when he heard it. A scream cut short, the sound of a struggle echoing off concrete walls. Most people would have called 911. Most people would have kept walking. Jack wasn't most people. He moved toward the sound, silent as smoke. Level 3, northwest corner. A young woman, maybe 22, pinned against a van. 3 men surrounding her. One held her arms, another tore at her jacket. The third stood watch, laughing. Jack didn't announce himself, didn't yell a warning, didn't give them a chance to stop. The first man went down before he knew Jack was there. An elbow to the temple, surgical and precise. He dropped like someone cut his power cord. The second man turned just in time to catch Jack's fist in his throat. He collapsed, gasping, clawing at his crushed windpipe. The third man was faster. He pulled a knife, lunged forward with the blade aimed at Jack's ribs. Wrong move. Jack sidestepped, caught the man's wrist, twisted until bones snapped. The knife clattered to the ground. The man screamed. Jack drove his knee into the attacker's face once, twice, 3 times. The man stopped screaming, stopped moving, stopped breathing. 7 seconds, 3 men neutralized. The woman collapsed against the van, sobbing, shaking. Jack knelt beside her, his voice calm. "You're safe now. Help is coming." He pulled out his phone, dialed 911, and waited. When the sirens arrived, Jack was still there, standing over the girl like a sentinel until the paramedics loaded her into the ambulance. Then he turned to the police, hands visible, and said 4 words: "I did this alone." At the station, a detective named Ramirez sat across from Jack in the interrogation room. He studied the scene photos, the bodies, the brutality of it. Then he looked at Jack, really looked. "Military?" Ramirez asked. Jack nodded. "Special operations?" Another nod. Ramirez leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You know one of them is dead, right? The third guy. Blunt force trauma. You beat him to death." "I know," Jack said. No emotion, just fact. "Self-defense won't fly. You could have stopped after the first hit, maybe the second, but you kept going. And Jack said nothing. Ramirez tapped the table. Here's the problem. This goes to trial, your whole background comes out. Your record, your missions. People will start asking questions you can't answer. Questions the government doesn't want answered. Jack met his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying the prosecutor wants this buried. You plead guilty to manslaughter, serve 8 years with good behavior, and everyone moves on. No trial, no media circus, no classified files getting subpoenaed. 8 years. Jack thought about his options. A trial meant exposure. Exposure meant the wrong people finding him, people from his past, people who wanted payback for missions that never officially happened. Prison was predictable, controllable, safe. I'll take the deal, Jack said. Ramirez raised an eyebrow. You sure? 8 years is a long time. Jack stood, ready for the handcuffs. It's better than the alternative. 3 months later, Jack Morrison walked into a maximum security prison carrying one simple goal: disappear, serve his time. Quietly. Keep his head down. Survive. But in a place where violence is currency and weakness is death, invisibility was never really an option. Not for a man like him. Jack's first 2 weeks inside were quiet. Too quiet. He learned the rhythms of the place. Breakfast at 6, yard time at 9, lunch at noon, the clanging of cell doors, the echo of boots on concrete, the way sound traveled through steel and stone, making everything louder and nothing clearer. His cellmate was a man named Bobby. 41 years old, car thief, serving his third stint. Bobby had been inside long enough to know how to read people. It was a survival skill in a place where the wrong glance could get you killed. And Bobby saw something in Jack immediately. The way he moved, economy of motion, nothing wasted. The way his eyes constantly tracked the room, cataloging exits, counting potential weapons. The way he positioned himself with his back to the wall, never exposed. Most inmates shuffled, slouched, wasted energy on posturing. Jack glided. One night, 3 days in, Bobby finally asked, "What did you do before?" Jack was lying on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. He didn't turn his head. I solved problems." Bobby waited for more. Nothing came. He didn't ask again, but Bobby did talk, and Jack listened. "You need to understand how this place works," Bobby said, sitting on the edge of his bunk. "There's a hierarchy, food chain, and if you don't know where you stand, someone else decides for you." Jack sat up slightly. "Keep talking." "Bob Morgan runs the main population. Bald guy, covered in ink. You'll see him soon enough. He's been king for 6 years. Controls who eats, who gets protection, who gets hurt. Everything flows through him. How? Fear and favors. You either work for him, owe him, or stay out of his way." Jack nodded slowly. "Who enforces for him?" "Guy named Viper. Tall, scar through his eyebrow. He's Bob's muscle. Does the dirty work. Vicious. Smart enough to know when to stop, mean enough not to care." Bobby paused, glancing at the cell door. "Then there's Dominic. Block C. He doesn't throw punches, doesn't need to. He's a chess player, manipulates everything from behind the scenes. Information broker, debt collector, the kind of guy who can make your life hell without ever touching you." Jack absorbed this, filing it away. Bobby leaned forward. "Listen to me, Jack. You seem like a decent guy. So here's the rule that'll keep you alive. Don't stand out. Don't look weak. Find the middle and stay there. Invisible is safe." Jack met his eyes. "And if I can't be invisible," Bobby's face darkened, "then you better be the scariest thing in here, because the moment Bob Morgan notices you, he'll test you. And if you fail that test, you're done." But Jack had already been noticed. His calm in an environment designed to break men stood out like blood on snow. Inmates whispered. Guards took note. Bob Morgan heard the whispers. The new guy. Quiet, too calm, doesn't react like the others. In prison, calm meant two things: broken or dangerous. Bob needed to know which. Day 14. Cafeteria. Jack sat alone, eating in silence. Bobby had warned him this morning. "Bob's watching you. Be smart." Across the room, Bob Morgan leaned back in his chair, surrounded by his crew. He studied Jack with the focus of a predator sizing up prey. Viper leaned in, whispering something. Bob grinned. He stood up, walked toward Jack's table. The cafeteria noticed. Conversations stopped. Eyes turned. Bob stopped 3 feet away, arms crossed. "You the new fish?" Jack looked up slowly. "I'm new. You know who I am?" "Bob Morgan." Bob's grin widened. "Good. Then you know how this works? You got 2 choices. You're with me or you're against me. So what's it going to be?" Jack set down his fork. calm, measured. I'm just here to do my time. Bob's smile faded. Wrong answer. He turned to walk away, then stopped. We'll talk again soon, new fish. Real soon. As Bob walked back to his table, Bobby muttered under his breath, "You just painted a target on your back." Jack picked up his fork, resumed eating. I know. 4 days after the cafeteria incident, Viper came for him. Jack was in the yard, standing near the fence, watching the patterns. Who moved where, who controlled what, who avoided who, learning the terrain. Morrison. The voice came from behind. Deep, controlled. Jack turned slowly. The man was tall and rangy, built like a boxer, lean muscle and coiled violence. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, jagged and old. His eyes were cold, calculating. This was Viper, Bob Morgan's enforcer. Bob wants to talk, Viper said, stepping closer. Jack didn't move. So talk. Viper's mouth twitched, almost a smile. You got options, new fish. You can join the crew. Protection, privileges, respect. Bob takes care of his people. Or you're marked, enemy of the house, and enemies don't last long in here. Jack studied him. Viper wasn't posturing. This wasn't a threat. It was a business proposition delivered with the promise of violence. Bob's offering you a place, Viper continued. Smart guys take it. Stupid guys end up in the infirmary, or worse. Jack let the silence stretch. Then he spoke. 6 words. Tell Bob I prefer being alone. Viper's expression hardened. The almost smile vanished. You're making a mistake, new fish. Bob doesn't like people who think they're special. Jack's response came without emotion. Flat, final. I'm not special. I'm just tired. For a moment, something passed between them. Viper saw it. The look in Jack's eyes. Not anger, not fear, not even defiance, just nothing, a flatness, an absence, the kind of emptiness that combat veterans carried like scar tissue, the look of a man who'd seen too much, done too much, and had nothing left to prove. Viper had been inside long enough to recognize that look. It made him hesitate. You sure about this? Viper asked, his voice quieter now. I'm sure. Viper held his gaze for another beat, then stepped back. Your funeral, Morrison. He turned and walked away, but the confidence in his stride had cracked just a little. Viper found Bob Morgan in the weight room, benching 225 like it was nothing. His crew stood around him laughing at some joke Viper had missed. Bob racked the bar, sat up, wiping sweat from his bald head. Well? Bob asked. He said no. The laughter stopped. Bob's grin faded. He said what? He doesn't want in, said he prefers being alone. Bob stood, his massive frame towering over Viper. And you let him disrespect me like that? I delivered the message, he gave his answer. What else? Viper hesitated. What else, Viper? There's something off about him, Bob. The way he looked at me, like he wasn't scared, not even a little. Bob laughed, hard, loud. His crew joined in, relieved the tension had broken. He wasn't scared? Bob said, still grinning. That's because he doesn't know any better. New fish always think they're tough until reality hits. Viper didn't laugh. I'm telling you, boss, this guy's either the dumbest man in here or what? Bob cut him off. Or he's dangerous? You think some quiet little nobody is going to be a problem for me? Viper said nothing. Bob clapped him on the shoulder too hard. Relax. I got this. The new fish needs a lesson, and I'm going to teach him personally. He turned to his crew, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Cafeteria, tomorrow. We're going to show this guy what happens when you disrespect Bob Morgan. The crew cheered. Viper walked away, the uneasy feeling still sitting heavy in his gut. He'd seen that look before, years ago, in another inmate, a man who stayed quiet until he didn't. That man had killed 3 people in the showers before the guards could stop him. Viper hoped Bob knew what he was doing. Across the yard, Jack stood alone, hands in his pockets, staring at nothing. Bobby approached cautiously. Viper came for you. Yeah. What did you say? I said no. Bobby exhaled slowly. Man, you just signed your own death warrant. Jack turned to face him, calm, steady. Maybe. Or maybe Bob Morgan's about to learn something. Learn what? Jack started walking toward the cell block. That some men aren't meant to be caged. 6 days later it happened again. Cafeteria. Lunch hour. Jack sat at his usual table, alone, eating in silence. The room buzzed with the usual noise, metal trays clattering, voices overlapping, the scrape of chairs on concrete. Then the noise changed, got quieter, tense. Jack didn't look up. He didn't need to. He could feel the shift in the air, the way predators announce themselves before they strike. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. Bob Morgan. He stopped directly in front of Jack's table, his crew flanking him like an honor guard. Viper stood to his right, arms crossed. 3 others spread out, blocking escape routes. The cafeteria fell silent. Every eye turned. Bob looked down at Jack, his face twisted in contempt. "You think you can disrespect me and just sit here eating?" Jack took another bite of his food, chewed slowly, swallowed, then Bob moved, fast. His hand shot out and slapped Jack's tray off the table. The crash echoed through the cafeteria like a gunshot. Food exploded across the floor. The metal tray skidded 10 feet before spinning to a stop. The room went electric. Inmates stopped eating. Some leaned forward, hungry for violence. Others leaned back, wanting distance from what was coming. Guards shifted positions, hands moving closer to their batons. Jack sat perfectly still. 5 seconds passed, 10. Then he stood, slowly, controlled, deliberate. He looked at Bob Morgan, then at the food scattered across the dirty floor, then back at Bob. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried. "This is your education, Bob. I'm teaching you who I am." Pause. "You're not learning fast enough." Bob's face flushed red, his jaw clenched. "You threatening me, new fish?" Jack's response came without hesitation, cold, simple, final. "I'm informing you there's a difference, and when you finally understand that difference, it will already be too late." The cafeteria held its breath. Bob took a step forward, fists clenched, muscles coiled. Jack didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even shift his weight. For a moment, Bob hesitated. Something in Jack's eyes made him pause, a stillness that didn't belong in a place this violent, a calm that felt wrong. But pride won. "You just made the worst mistake of your life, Morrison." Jack turned and walked away, leaving his food on the floor, leaving Bob Morgan standing there surrounded by his crew watching him go. The cafeteria exploded with noise. Some inmates laughed, mocking Bob's failed intimidation. Others whispered frantically, stunned by the new inmate's suicidal confidence. But one man stayed silent. Dominic. He sat in the corner, watching, always watching. He was older than most, 52, with gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't look dangerous. That was the point. Dominic had survived 15 years in maximum security by reading people better than they read themselves, and what he saw now was a collision course. Jack Morrison had just drawn a line in the sand, and Bob Morgan was too proud to step back from it. Dominic leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. This was going to be interesting. Across the cafeteria, Viper leaned close to Bob. "He's testing you, boss. Playing mind games." Bob's hands were shaking. Rage or fear, Viper couldn't tell. "I want him dealt with tomorrow. The yard." "You sure? We could—" "Tomorrow," Bob snapped. "I'm gonna break him myself, in front of everyone, so they all remember who runs this place." Viper nodded slowly, but the uneasy feeling was back, stronger this time. In his cell, Bobby sat on his bunk, head in his hands. Jack walked in, calm as ever. "You're insane," Bobby said. "You know that, right? You just made it worse." Gil climbed onto his bunk, lay back, closed his eyes. It was always going to get worse. "What are you going to do?" Jack's voice was quiet, almost tired. "What I always do, which is survive." Bobby shook his head. "Bob's going to come for you tomorrow, in the yard, with his whole crew." Jack said nothing. Bobby stared at him. "You're not scared, are you?" Jack opened his eyes, stared at the ceiling. Fear is for people who still have something to lose. The next afternoon, recreation period. The yard was packed, inmates scattered across concrete, some lifting weights, others playing cards, most just killing time. Jack stood at the pull-up bars, working through his routine. Slow, controlled, breathing steady. He'd done 12 when he felt it, the shift. Conversation stopped, movement slowed, eyes turned. Jack dropped from the bar, turned around. Bob Morgan was walking toward him, not alone. Viper flanked his right. 4 other crew members spread out on either side. Muscle, enforcers, men who'd earned their place through violence. 6 men total, moving like a gang preparing for war. The yard reacted instantly. Inmates backed away, creating space, forming a loose circle around the pull-up area. No one wanted to be close when this went down, but everyone wanted to watch. Bob's voice boomed across the concrete. "You got a death wish, Morrison?" Jack stood perfectly still, waiting. Bob kept coming, muscles coiled, fists clenched, feeding off the energy of his crew and the watching crowd. "Nobody disrespects me in my house, you hear me? Nobody." Closer now, 20 feet, 15. "You think you're tough because you were military? This ain't the desert, soldier boy. This is my kingdom." 10 feet, 8. Jack spoke, calm, quiet, final. You should have stayed where you were, Bob. Bob lunged. What happened next lasted 3 seconds, but it would be discussed in whispers for years. Bob threw a haymaker right hook, massive, designed to cave in Jack's jaw, end the fight with one punch. Jack moved, a slight pivot, minimal motion. Bob's fist whistled past his ear, missing by inches. Jack stepped inside Bob's guard, closing the distance to nothing, and drove his knee upward. The impact sounded like a bat hitting a watermelon. Bob Morgan's head snapped back. Blood exploded from his shattered nose. His eyes rolled white. His body crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. The kingpin of the prison hit the concrete unconscious. 1 second, Viper moved next, reaching for Jack. Wrong move. Jack's elbow came around in a tight arc and crashed into Viper's solar plexus with surgical precision. Viper's lungs emptied. He dropped to his knees, gasping, clawing at his chest. 2 seconds. The other 4 crew members froze. Suddenly, they weren't looking at a new fish. They were looking at a trained killer. 3 seconds. The yard fell into absolute silence. Get down, now. Guards rushed in, batons drawn, shouting commands. Jack immediately dropped to his knees, hands behind his head. No resistance, total compliance. 4 guards surrounded him, weapons raised. One drove his knee into Jack's back, forcing him flat against the concrete. Another cuffed his wrists, tight enough to hurt. Jack didn't fight, didn't speak, just let them take him. Across the yard, medics rushed to Bob Morgan. He was still unconscious, blood pooling beneath his head. They checked his pulse, called for a stretcher. Viper was on his hands and knees, still gasping. The 4 crew members stood motionless, unsure what to do without their leader. The guards hauled Jack to his feet, shouting at the crowd to disperse, but no one moved. 300 inmates stood frozen, staring. They'd just watched their king fall in 3 seconds. In the corner of the yard, Dominic stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the guards drag Jack away. An inmate next to him whispered, "Did you see that?" Dominic nodded slowly. "I saw. Who the hell is this guy?" Dominic's eyes tracked Jack as he disappeared through the steel doors. Someone we should have left alone. In the infirmary, Bob Morgan woke up an hour later. His face was swollen. His nose was broken in 3 places. His pride was shattered beyond repair. A guard stood nearby. "You know who did this to you?" Bob's voice came out thick, distorted. "Morrison. The new guy?" Bob closed his eyes. The new guy. The nobody. The man he thought he could break. "Yeah," Bob muttered. "The new guy." The guard made a note and left. Bob lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the fight in his mind. 3 seconds. That's all it took. For 6 years he'd ruled this place, built an empire on fear and respect, and some quiet inmate had destroyed it in 3 seconds. Bob Morgan wasn't just beaten, he was finished, and everyone knew it. 2 hours later, they brought Jack to the warden's office. He sat in handcuffs across from Warden Carlson, a man in his late 50s with gray hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much violence to be shocked by it anymore. On the desk between them sat a thick manila folder. Most of its contents were hidden behind thick black bars, redacted, classified. Carlson studied Jack for a long moment, silent, evaluating. Then he spoke. "Do you know how hard it was to get your file, Morrison?" Jack said nothing. "I had to call in favors with people I didn't even know existed, people who don't officially exist themselves." Carlson tapped the folder. "Most of your military record is classified at levels I've never seen. Black operations, 0 footprint missions, a kill count that..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Let's just say it explains what I saw in that yard." Jack remained silent, waiting. Carlson leaned back in his chair. "Bob Morgan will recover. Broken nose, concussion, bruised ego, but his reign is over. The entire population knows it." He gestured toward the window overlooking the yard. "You just created a power vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. As not my problem," Jack said quietly. "It is now." Carlson leaned forward. "I have 2 options for you. Option 1, I put you in solitary confinement for the assault. 6 months minimum, maybe longer. You'll be safe, but you'll be alone, in a box, for months." Jack's jaw tightened slightly. "Or option 2, Carlson's tone shifted. You move to Block C under Dominic's oversight. Single cell, better commissary access, more freedom. In exchange for what? You become my unofficial insurance policy." Jack's eyes narrowed. Carlson continued. "You keep the violence to a minimum. You prevent the young predators from tearing this place apart. When someone needs to be reminded how things work, you remind them. And in return, I look the other way when you need to enforce order. You want me to be your enforcer. I want you to be what you already are. The difference is now you do it with my blessing instead of my punishment." Silence filled the room. Jack stared at the redacted file on the desk. He came to prison to disappear, to serve his time invisibly, to hide from the world and the ghosts of his past. But invisibility was never truly an option, not for a man like him, not in a place like this. He'd tried to stay quiet, tried to stay out of it, and still the violence found him because that's what he was, what he'd always been, a weapon. The only choice left was how he used it. Finally, Jack spoke. "No unnecessary violence. I only respond to threats." Warden Carlson nodded slowly. A faint smile touched his lips. "I wouldn't want it any other way, Mr. Morrison." He stood, extending his hand. Jack stared at it for a moment, then stood and shook it. The handcuffs clinked. "Welcome to your new assignment." The guards escorted Jack out through the corridor. As they turned a corner, Jack saw Bobby standing near the cell block entrance. Their eyes met. Bobby looked at him differently now, not as a cellmate, not as a friend, as something else. Respect, fear, maybe both. Bobby nodded once. Jack returned it. Then the guards led him away. That night, Jack sat alone in his new cell in Block C. Single occupancy. Quieter. More space. Through the small window, he could see the yard below. Inmates moving in groups, nervous, uncertain. The king was dead, and everyone was waiting to see who would take his place. Jack closed his eyes. He'd come to prison to disappear, to hide from what he was. But you can't hide from yourself. You can only choose how you use what you are. In trying to disappear, Jack Morrison had become exactly what the prison needed. The most dangerous man in a building full of dangerous men. The ghost who now ruled from the shadows, not by choice, but by nature, and in a place where violence was the only language, Jack Morrison spoke fluently. If you made it this far, you just witnessed how a former Navy SEAL dismantled a prison's entire power structure in 3 seconds flat. This is the kind of story that reminds us why respect isn't given. It's earned through action, not words. What did you think of Jack Morrison's journey from wanting invisibility to becoming the ghost who rules the shadows? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of hidden power and inevitable justice, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories of ordinary people with extraordinary pasts. Hit the notification bell so you never miss the next jaw-dropping tale. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.